Hello and good evening, everybody, or good morning, or good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. We've just been looking up a few distances because we do have an international audience, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm in the United Kingdom, other people are scattered around the world, which is even better. Um, but it's not about me. This is about coaching families. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to discover Dominique Brits, who is a family coach. Now, when I was going through my coaching training not that long ago, I was told that coaching families was very, very difficult. And I wondered why, because I think coaching families should be relatively straightforward, but with reservations. And the more I looked into it, the more challenging it really could be. But if you approach it right, then it could be absolutely wonderful. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dominic to join us now, and we're going to do a sort of a chat show routine. I'm going to ask her questions. And if you've got any questions that you would like to ask Dominic, then please put them in the chat and I will select them as they come up, or try and find somewhere that they're pertinent. And this should go on for about 40 minutes. And then after that, we'll open the floor to other questions and general discussion. So without further ado, Dominic, welcome all the way from Johannesburg. And this is the wonder of Zoom. As we've already worked out, it's 5,600 miles between you and me, yet we're together on the screen. It's wonderful. And family coaching. So what's your background and what pulled you into coaching in the first place?
Well, thank you for having me here, Ian. Like it was just meeting you for the first time. We just hit it off and we just had an amazing discussion about what we do. And so being here and just chatting to you is just amazing. So thank you for this opportunity. So my background is I went into teaching straight after school and I taught for almost 2 decades. And I taught in all different walks of life, in private schools, in public schools, in special needs schools. I taught remedial, I taught nursery schools, I taught high school, and so I really got a range of working with different age groups of children. And what I realized closer to the end of my career as a teacher, that 80% of my children that I was teaching was emotional and not academic issues and problems and struggles. And through this process over time, what was very frustrating for me was I was connecting with a parent on as a academic support, and then they had a physio support, and then they had a psychology support, and it was all completely separate, and none of us were getting together to be able to fully support the child in the best way possible. And so I stepped out of teaching because I felt like I couldn't support kids and parents in the way that I wanted to. And I've been working with families for 25 years. And, through time, as anything else, it takes time to get used to the adjusting of working with a whole group of people. It's like individual coaching versus, you know, um, group coaching. And with families, it's a lot more emotional. So it's not just work based, but it's a very, very emotional. So it's really working with that versus against that. And so this is my pathway to family coaching.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that. I think you've already identified the perhaps the potential, dare I say, it, poo traps, if I'm going to quote A.A. Milne here, um, going to look for heifer lumps and things like that, that the family coaching could bring. And I'd love to explore that a little bit further. So what do you actually identify as the benefit of coaching a family? And we'll come on to the sort of the nitty gritty a little later, but the benefits, the general benefits of coaching families.
The benefits of coaching families is for everybody just to be on the same page. We live at home with the people that trigger us the most, that we love the most, and yet the communication at many times can be not there, if I can say that, and or misinterpreted, or so the communication could, it's the wording I'm looking for.
Breakdown, non-existent.
Non-existent, absolutely. And so the benefit is actually bringing everybody together and intentionally having a conversation about a certain topic, and having somebody there that just goes, okay, it's your turn to talk, it's your turn to talk, it's your turn to talk. Now that you've all had your say, let's find a solution, versus just focusing on the problem.
So perhaps that's a sort of is that not a mediation job?
It could be a mediation job, but I think mediation is more about, there are times where I am mediating when it becomes very, very intense, when there's a lot of emotions and a lot of fighting around certain things. But there's also moments where, I work with a lot of teens and they don't really know how to communicate certain things to their parents without feeling like they're disappointing them. And sometimes with couples, there's again that similar thing where it's like every time I say this, they freak out. So it gives them that opportunity to, sometimes I step in and go, I think this is what she's trying to say, because I've had individual coaching sessions. It allows that communication to then start to flow.
Okay, you've just mentioned individual coaching sessions. You also talked about team coaching. What is the what would be your standard approach to a parent who's come to you and says, "Look, this is happening. My teenage son is withdrawing further and further. My young daughter is just changing schools, and there's so much angst within the family at the moment. What can you suggest?"
So that approach, what I would do is I'd, first have the chat with the parent or parents, depending who is involved. Then I have an individual chat with the son and an individual chat with the daughter to see where they're at. And then from there, depending on what the situation is, as you know, with coaching, every situation is different. And depending on that, I either suggest that it's individual or group, or parent and child, or parent and then child and then together. So it is very flexible in that space where it's not just one mold, one for everything. It really depends on the situation, because sometimes what happens is that the parent will come to me and say, oh, my son is this and this and that and that. And I speak to the son and it's a very different story. And sometimes
It
the
always
problem is
is.
the parent, and it's
Yes.
like,
Okay.
okay, maybe we need to, you and me and the parent need to have ways to help approach, versus the child needs the coaching. So that also all depends on that.
Uh, Okay, thanks. But what about confidentiality? Surely that must be a bit of a stumbling block.
Yes. So we all sign contracts. I have a set contract that we all sign. And so with regards to confidentiality, if I am doing individual coaching sessions, for example, if I'm doing individual coaching sessions with a teen, I always have feedback sessions with a parent. And around confidentiality, I always say, is this something, obviously if the teen has to share something, is this something you'd like to share with your parents? And majority of the time, the teens go, you can tell my parents anything. I think I've had one or two incidences where the teens are like, I don't want you to share this part, but the rest you can share. And it's not parts that are like illegal or anything like that, but it's just more of like a personal thing that they don't want their parents to know. And so from there, then I don't share the details of what is going on with the teen, but I share how the parents can support the children, how the parents can support them. And then, obviously with confidentiality, I always say to them, you share what you'd like to share with your parents. And it's the same with the parents. And then when we all come together, they're doing most of the talking, I'm doing most of the questioning, as we coaches do. So I don't really share much with that, but that's, I hope that answers the question, but that's the process.
Okay, thanks. So if a teen says, yes, you can share it with my parents, or parent, these days, or even my family supporter, um, have you ever been in a situation where you think, hang on a minute, I'm being used as the communication link here? Would it not be better coming from the child concerned?
Sometimes yes, and with that, it's part of the process is teaching them, showing them, guiding them on how to communicate that to parents. And I've had, again, many sessions where I'm like, okay, I feel like you need to share this with mom. How do you want to approach it? What are we going to, what can you say that, mom will actually listen to you? Or what can you say that you won't feel like you're stumbling over your words? And we have that coaching session of preparing them for those type of conversations. So in the beginning, there are times, but then, I get to the point where I'm like, okay, it's time for you to start communicating versus me.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia's added a question here. So how flexible do you think the parents are to see a different point of view than theirs? What a good question.
Beautiful question. When parents approach me, especially the one who contacts me, their flexibility, they're open to a different perception. When the parent doesn't contact me, so for example, the dad that didn't contact me, that doesn't feel that coaching is going to help, then that's when it's more rigid.
And
So,
how do you cope with the rigidity there?
so there's so much I can do. There's so much guidance I can give. I try share perspective of when they were growing up and kind of get them to tell their story of, what was it like when you were 14, and how did you handle certain situations, and do you feel like your son is in a similar situation than you? And often the response is, yeah, but look, I'm fine. And I'm going, sometimes I'm sure you're fine. Maybe there's a little bit more support, you could need. And then there's other times when I have this conversation with the rigid parent, they go, I was exactly the same. And this is what my dad did. I'm like, okay, so what would you have liked your dad to do differently? I would love for him to have done that. I'm like, so do you think approaching your son like that would make a difference? Oh, maybe. Now all of a sudden it lands because they had experienced it. With the more rigid parents, again, like I said, it's almost like a once-off conversation, and then I don't speak to them again. I speak to the mother, or I speak to the parent who contacted me. But also, again, in those situations, it's normally divorced parents, parents that are separated, where the mom or the single dad is then paying for the coaching sessions, and then the other parent is not.
That must be quite a difficult one.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I've had situations where the one parent is fully on board. And I actually heard something today where, as a single parent, we're not supposed to actually be single parents. That's not how, like, we designed to be. And so, as a single parent, you actually need more support than anything else. And so, if they feel like the support could come from me, and then I can suggest other support that can help them as a unit, then she's getting, or they getting, the support that they need, and then the dynamic between the dad or the mom that's not on board is sorry, I keep on saying dad, and I apologize. I'm noticing I'm saying that, and the only reason why I'm saying that is because majority of the time it's dad that is the rigid one. So no other reason.
Perish the thought. Arguably the single male here. I think.
I just noticed and dad. Oh my gosh, actually, I'm just like going through all my clients. I'm like, I think I've had like one mom that's been very rigid, and the rest
Mhm,
have been the dads. So that's been
mhm.
interesting now that I'm saying it out loud.
That's okay. It's all right. I'll let you off. It's all right.
No, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Sorry, all the single dads out there, or all the dads.
I'm in a way I'm blessed because I've been a stay-at-home dad and I've also been a go-away dad. So I've been in both situations, and certainly with my second family, I have been able to apply an awful lot of information that I learned from my first time round, which is actually quite interesting and quite enlightening and an opening. I thought, well, if I hadn't learned that first time, what can I do differently this time? But
Yes.
Naja's got an email here. So, what about a teen fails to apply what they were coached on, um, and how to tell their mum about about it when basically it says it's not working? How can you handle that sort of situation? I think that's Naja. I think that's what you're saying here.
Yes, with my typing problems because Zoom just kicked me out again.
So can you clarify that question just so that I'm
Yes,
fully
you
understanding?
gave Dominique the example that when you coach a teen, if there's a subject matter that needs to be shared with the mother,
Mm-hmm.
the more receptive one, and the teen kind of gathers the enthusiasm, says, "Great, what my coach has helped me discover that this is a way I can talk and I can share whatever the subject matter is."
Mm-hmm.
But after, when he comes back to the next session and tells you nothing worked, it didn't work, it's frustrating, it's not helping, what do you do in these kind of situations?
I love that question. And I'm laughing because I'm like, it sounds so familiar so many times. So, you know, coaching a teen is, it's like coaching anybody, but it's a lot more, you have a lot more influence. So, in a situation like that, it's going, okay, but what did you do? How did you approach the situation? And if the situation didn't work, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that you need to find a way that works for you. And trying it once doesn't mean that it's never going to work. It's because you've tried it once and you're new to this. It's something new. You're learning how to communicate with mom. Mom may have reacted in the same way, but you're also learning to communicate with her differently. And in a situation like that, then I'll also chat to mom and go, we're coaching on this. This is how you need to support. So I just need you to, if he's coming to you and says, hey, mom, I just need to have a conversation with you, I need you to, instead of going into attack mode or guidance mode, or I'm going to tell you what to do, I actually just need you to sit and listen for a moment. And let's see if that changes the communication. So, like with anything, we do it once and we say, oh, it doesn't never works. Journaling never works for me. Meditation never works for me. Why? Because I've tried it once and I couldn't, the answers didn't miraculously come to me. So it's always practice. It's practice and practice. And this is why we practice in the sessions. And then often what I find with teens is that they either do it or they don't. It's not like, oh, I tried a little bit and then I was too scared. It was like, okay, yes, I did it and the result was amazing, or I forgot. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about the I forgot story. let's speak about this. No, there's actually fear around that. Okay, why is there fear around it? Because I don't want to disappoint mom or dad. Okay, let's talk about that. And then we go down that journey. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Excellent. I love it when a question gets answered.
Me too.
It's amazing. Hey, one thing that I've been trying, and actually I've been trying this with with a pair who actually they got married today, which is great. They're they're around about my age, so but it's still great nevertheless. And that is effectively coaching by proxy. You know, the husband is a great friend of mine. We spend a lot of time drinking coffee and things like that. But he always seems to come to me with situations about his family, rather than coaching his family. He asks me he gives me the scenario, and I coach him on the scenario, and he then goes back and tries it out. I call this coaching by proxy. I don't know whether anybody else has another term for it. Have you used it? Do you use it?
Absolutely, I do. And as a coach, as you know, if you're not open, then it's not going to work. And so I have parents come to me where they feel like they're the most open to starting this journey. And as they are the most open, then they start to do it differently. And then as they start to do it differently and the family dynamic starts to change slightly, then we start to bring the others in. And so it's almost like warming them up to this opportunity, because I also know that there's that stigma around life coaching, where like, what is the point? And teens, when they don't want to, it's like absolutely not, because there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around that. But you know, and this is where I love how what you say, coaching through proxy, because that's exactly what it is. He's stepping into a coaching role. And if you look at the drama triangle and you flip that around, you know, the drama triangle, the persecutor, rescuer, and victim.
Okay.
So you've got the drama triangle, which happens obviously very much in a family dynamic. You've got the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer, and you go around in a circle, and everybody's each of those roles. Now, if you flip that triangle around, you've got the coach, the creator, and the challenger. And so what he's doing is that he's stepping in as a coach versus a rescuer. And then he can also step in as a challenger instead of a persecutor. And then step in as a creator versus a victim. And then when that starts to change within the family, then that's where the magic happens.
Okay, that's an interesting one. I have to admit that the drama triangle doesn't immediately spring to my mind. I'll just put it on the chat. Hopefully, I got that one right. Hi, Catherine. Lovely to see you too. And it's an interesting way of looking at it. You say this is quite frequent in families. Is there any particular reason for that, do you think?
I think from the feedback from the parents that have been in a situation like that, it's that their family's not open to it for whatever reason. But they're still wanting the support. They're still wanting for things to be done differently. And so they receiving the coaching for themselves as a parent, doing the healing as well for themselves as a parent, and then stepping into that role within the family dynamic.
Yeah. Thank you. And my next question really is, what do you think is the greatest takeaway for a family who have undertaken family coaching? Okay, the two greatest takeaways.
The two greatest takeaways.
Yes.
Healing.
Okay. In what sense?
Your biggest traumas begin in your family. And so when you learn to communicate and open up and become more authentic and honest and truthful within your own family, a lot of healing happens. There's that space of true, like, trust again. So I would say healing, definitely.
Okay.
And then the other one, the biggest other takeaway, I mean, there's so many, so I'm really trying to, would be joy. Actually, it would be peace.
Peace.
It would be peace,
Okay.
because if I'm able to communicate with you instead of argue with you, it's easier. If I'm able to open up to you instead of shy away, it brings that peace. It will bring trust and peace and honesty. So I would say peace and healing.
Thank you. I was going to sort of preempt on that one and think I thought you were going to say communication. In a way, you have, but I think you have identified that communication is the pathway
Yes.
to those takeaways, which it wasn't meant to trick you out or anything else like that. It was absolutely genuine, and thank you very much indeed for that, because to me that means a huge amount, and I can see it, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. But and to a certain extent, that's what us coaches do. We open people out, and if they can have that sort of communication and have that tolerance, that interpersonal tolerance, then they can sort of relax so much. What's the what can you give as hints and tips to those who may be sort of approached by a family to coach them? Because so often, especially in the adolescent and child coaching world, it's a case of the parents saying, "My child needs this," and there's that bit inside you that says, "Is it your child needing this, or is it you thinking your child needs this, or what?" And so it can get very, very confused. You're expecting to coach the child, or the parent is expecting you to coach the child, when actually you really want to coach the parent.
Yes.
How do you deal
So
with that one?
so that's a really good one. With regards to that is, with non-family coaching, you meet the person once, you have a chat, and then you move forward or you don't move forward. With family coaching, you've got to meet everybody in the family or whoever else is involved within this coaching space to be able to move forward. So you meet the parents, which I do. I meet them for half an hour. Then I meet the teen or the child for half an hour. And then I say, you go back and you make a decision if this is what you want. Around that, over time, if we all need coaching, regardless of whether the teen actually needs or not, or the child actually, like, we all need some sort of support and coaching. And so there have been situations where the parent probably needs it more than the child does, but the child needs more support currently than the parent does. And so I start with the child to build them up, to build the strength, to build the confidence, and then I step in with the parent. So there is almost like a strategic plan, and yet not, because it all depends. but there have been times where the parents start to notice a difference in the teen, in the child, and they go, whoa, actually, I need coaching too, because I've noticed such a difference. And then that's when I go, okay, so you can either have coaching with me, or if you prefer someone separate, but then we all need to come together to make sure that we're moving forward.
And that's interesting. And have you ever come across the situation whereby you have found yourself coaching the child and found that while the parents may be reticent to be coached because they think it's not below them, but they think it's going to be embarrassing. Have you ever found yourself in a position of actually getting in collusion with the child, getting the child to coach the parent?
For the child to coach the parent?
Yeah.
I have actually.
Okay.
And in a situation like that was not only empowering for the child, but it was very humbling for the parent.
Okay.
It did that whole, like, I don't have to know everything as a parent space. You know, and so what was happening in that situation was that the parent felt like they needed to know all the answers. And so they were holding on to that, but I don't know, you know, so they would go into like that panic, that spiral panic mode, and then go into lecture, and you should be doing this and this way, and because I say so. And then they're not doing it. And the teen, you know, and so often the teens go to me, but my parents don't do it. You know, they tell me I must get off my phone, but they're on the phone all the time. They tell you I must do this, but they don't do that, you know. So in that type of situation, it was so humbling, and I was there, I was witnessing it. And I actually just watched it, and you could see the parent going, it was almost the space of relief that I don't have to hold the world on my shoulders, because my child has got it.
Mm-hmm.
They've got it a lot more than what I've given them credit for. And they actually came back to me and said, I actually need coaching more than my child does.
Wow.
And it was like,
Wow, that's powerful. And
and
you said
so,
thank you. And you
so
said
it
thank
was,
you.
yeah, there we go, you know, like,
Yeah.
yeah. And you know, your child has proven that they can do it. And so can you.
Have you come across the expression the helicopter parent?
Yes,
Do you get much of that?
sometimes, especially with studying.
Okay.
So I also work with teens with studying, having been a teacher. So I work with studying skills, learning styles, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, definitely the helicopter parent, writing all the notes for the child, doing the schedule for the child, making sure that they're doing everything, but yet they're actually not supporting the child, they're irritating the child. And so very much part of my sessions is I have a 30-minute session with the parent, 30-minute session with the teen. They say yes, we go down a journey, and then I have a feedback session with the parent. And in that feedback session, that's when I nail them around helicopter parenting. We're going, you need to back off. And I've said this to parents. I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I need you to back off a little bit. You don't have to hover. You don't have to be there constantly. You need to trust. And again, it's a situation where they're like holding breath, but it's like, oh, thank goodness. Like, I don't have to continuously do grade 7 and grade 8 and grade 9. I'm like, you finish school. Let your child go through school. It's their responsibility. So very much I've had that, and I've had to, but because of the relationship that I've already created with them, I can say that to them without them getting offended.
You know, it's interesting, and having been, you know, I am a parent myself, and I suspect that there are quite a few here. And the difficulty is that letting go, isn't it? It's that second weaning. You know, weaning them on, weaning them away from, you know, onto hard foods and things like that. it's a case of weaning them out of the nest to a certain extent, which I think a lot of people, especially these days, find incredibly difficult. I think personally it's because people are so much more aware of the ills in the world, and I think that might make it very, very difficult for people. I mean, you know, I'm old enough that I've sort of been through it, and I can look back and see it. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I used to be a helicopter pilot, but it is that aspect, and perhaps it's also the more feminine side that wants to that instinctively needs to control. And I've noticed this, you know, with my wife, that it wasn't until she had her first child that she then became very controlling. And I thought, yeah, okay, that must be instinctive because you want to protect your offspring. And the difficulty then is, when do you stop protecting your offspring and allow them to go out and fight their own battles? And that, obviously, you know, we're in that sort of situation, and that, I think perhaps that is creating so much anxiety within families, and perhaps the parents' anxieties are being subconsciously passed to the children.
Yeah,
And so it must be quite difficult to go through that. Do you see that in any of your cases?
absolutely. What I see is parents being protective. The problem I feel is, number one, they haven't dealt with their own stuff, their own triggers, their own traumas, right? So if they've felt neglected as a child because of their past, they are going to be that overprotective parent. If they have experienced a certain something, they're going to be a different type of parent, right? So they haven't dealt with that. The second thing is that they're not growing with their child. So when our children grow, their brain changes, their attitude changes, their moods change, their body changes. And as a parent, we need to grow with them. They're not our babies of 3 years old anymore. We don't need to protect them like these little babies. When they're 13, they still need us. We're always here to protect them. We're always here to support us. But there's also that stage where, because they're older, we can completely back away. But actually, that's when they actually need the most support, but the support needs to be shared differently. Not, hello, my baby, do you need a hug? Oh, my darling, come here, let me. They don't want that when they're 13. No. What they want is everything okay? Like, what's up? You want to chill on your bed? Cool. Can I lie next to you? Let's, watch TikTok together. Hey, like, what's your favorite game? Can I get involved? Can you show me how to play? That's what they want. They want you to be involved. They're desperate for you to be involved, but you need to navigate what type of personality and what type of child they are around that.
Okay, so that would open up a huge debate, but I think, you know, time is pressing on, and I did promise people that they could have their own say. So Dominique, I thank you so much indeed for all of your answers. I go away from here enlightened, or I will do in 20 minutes time. And so thank you so much indeed for your insight. It's been really, really, really good. Now, I'm going to open this up to the to the rest. There can either be questions for Dominique, or if you've got situations that you would like to discuss, or case studies that you would want to bring up to endorse any points that Dominique has made today, then we'd love to hear from you now. As always, it goes incredibly quiet.
I have a
Hello,
question.
Cynthia.
Hi.
Lovely to see you, and
Thank you.
our thoughts are with you in Lebanon.
Thank you very much. Okay, regarding the last point you talked about, where the parents need to be involved, I've noticed something with the parents that I talk to about their children before we start coaching their children. Usually the kids that come to me are usually the youngest in the family. So the parents are, they usually have, like, they give more time for the eldest because they're usually worried how they're going to work with them, how they're going to raise them up. When it comes to the last child, it becomes like they don't feel that they want to interact. They're very tired, you know. So how can we help the parents get more involved in their children's life, especially if they're the youngest?
Yes. Yeah. If you're a parent, you know, like you just are tired all the time, right? It is that space of exhaustion, and it comes down to balance. And it's just sharing, like, what is it that, you know, your youngest loves to do? They love to craft. All you need to do is sit for 10 minutes. So it's not necessarily getting involved in needing to be, you know, super energetic and doing, but it's actually just being with them. It's that quality time that they're craving. The thing that I've realized as a parent is that we have forgotten how to play. We have forgotten how to use our imagination. And so when a child says, "Hey, mommy, do you want to play Barbies with me?" You're going, "Oh, I'd rather cook, actually." Not because you'd rather cook, but because you actually don't even know how to play Barbie. Like, how do you go, "Hey, Barbie, hi," you know, and you do this, like, we've forgotten as parents how to play. And so that's part of, if you don't like to play Barbies, then say, "Hey, let's craft together. Hey, let's sit, like, oh, you know, you love to spend time in the garden. Cool, you know, let me watch you. Why don't you tell me about what are you planting?" And that's the involvement that can happen. It doesn't need to be big energy. It can just be that, those little 10 minutes extra. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Any more for any more? Or I'll have to jump in again. Hi, Calista.
Hello. Dominique, thanks so much for your insight. And as a parent who has had a session, it's yeah, it is hard to, not hard to hear, but it is hard to maneuver around the letting go side of things. Born in South Africa, raised in Namibia, schooled in South Africa, married in the UK. You just, I mean, you are in South Africa, you know what the situation is when it comes to like weapons in the classroom, things, weapons in the streets, you know, neighborhoods where we've got burglar bars, things like that, you know. So my mindset is still very much that whole thing of, if I don't know where my child is at every second of the day, that's a problem for me. And so I think that when my kids ask me, I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. So when the 11 and 14-year-olds ask me, can they go to the football pitch with their friends, for instance, it raises all kinds of alarm bells in me, you know. That's fun. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Whether I'm asking a question or I'm sort of trying to defend the whole thing of parents not necessarily want to let go. But also I learned in my sessions, which was with Ian, that I have to recognize between, is it my want or my child's want? That was a very hard lesson. Because now,
I remember it well.
oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, what a light bulb.
It's something that I have to consciously think about now when I parent, especially when I reprimand, you know. Am I doing this for my peace of mind, for my child's safety, for gaining control again? You know, so all these things go through my mind. And sadly, I think I always justify whatever decision I make. Yeah, as the
Beautiful.
parent. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. You know, I think letting go has so many layers to it, right? And we think we must just let go and then just trust. You know, that's the desire, that's what it's supposed to be. But actually it doesn't work like that because they're your children, right? And the letting go part can be a little thing, can be slightly, instead of messaging them in 5 minutes, message them in 10 minutes. You know, if you shout at them, part of letting go is going, okay, you move back, you calm yourself down and go, okay, I'm really sorry I shouted. I'm really sorry I lost it. How did that make you feel when I did that? Let me explain to you why. And all of a sudden the conversation starts to flow. Then the communication starts to flow. Because at the end of the day, as a parent, you will never let go. My parents are now 79. They still haven't let go of us. You know, they're still phoning us, what you doing? My mom still checks, you know, the find a friend, you know, and she'll randomly go, hey, I see this is where you at. I'm like, Mom, I'm 42. Can you just let me live my life? You know? So as a parent, we never let go. It's not about letting go, but it's about learning to trust where you at and honor where you at right now. This is where you at. What can you do slightly differently? What can you say to your 14-year-old that can allow him to message you? Do you mind messaging me as you arrive? I've still got to find my friend. I'll still watch you 24/7, and you know, but I won't tell you that part. But you know, allowing them to see that you're not needing to know every move, because that's also not good for you, right? But it's also allowing yourself to be gentle with regards to letting go. Letting go is not just forgetting about. Letting go is just having that space where you can breathe. Okay, my boys are at the soccer field. Okay, amazing. Celebrate yourself because you've acknowledged that they're safe and they are okay. Breathe, part of letting go.
It's rather like sort of paying out the rope, isn't it?
One slight string at a time.
They're still attached. Or is it paying out the elastic?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you have that moment of letting go, celebrate yourself, because this is what we forget to do. Like, yes, I breathed when they arrived at the soccer pitch. Woohoo! That's amazing. I did it. Okay. That's enough for the week, but you know, like that's what I did. Because what happens is the more we feel good, the more we want to feel good. But if we don't acknowledge those small moments, then we feel like we're not doing anything, and then we don't do anything. So acknowledge those little moments of joy, that moments of relief, that you know that they're okay. And you'll notice as you do that more and more and more, you'll notice that you're not needing to control the whole situation. It's actually, you've never controlled it, but the feeling is there.
Thanks, Dominic. I have to say that I think this is an incredibly difficult situation for many, if not most, parents. Is learning to let go, because it's not something you've ever had to do before, and to acknowledge that you've got to is perhaps the first step, and then it's bit by bit, and it's almost sort of building the habit, which takes time. And of course, the first thing you would normally do is say, where are they? What's going on? And it's, as you say, it's taking that breath and saying, right, okay, give me another minute, then I'll ask the question. And then it's 2 minutes, and then it's 3 minutes, and so on and so forth. And if they get into the routine of saying, we know that mum or dad will be happy to know that we have arrived, and then nothing else, and then that's all what it's about, then they will get into the routine as well of saying, arrived, or I'm leaving, which is exactly what we do with my two. But on the other hand, my wife is very much along those lines of, I want to know where you are at all times, because her upbringing was fraught with challenges. And this is one of the difficulties. And she's been let down by people saying that they are not where they were supposed to be. And that is her immediate reaction. And there's me saying, yeah, let them bide, let them bide, let them bide. But it's very difficult. It is very difficult for everybody, especially these days of instantaneous communication. We've got the facilities to be able to check up on our children 24/7. The challenge is not using them. And I think that is arguably one of the greatest challenges that parents today face, is allowing the parents to have their own space.
And I think a big part of it is also the kids being responsible around that. And that's one of the things that I do a lot of coaching on, is where, you know, the teens will go, oh, my mom just irritates me. She messages me all the time, you know, when I arrive and then when I leave. And, you know, I'm like, well, has she asked you to message? Yes. Do you want your mom to stop messaging you? Yes. Then message her back and say I've arrived and say I'm leaving. And they all of a sudden go, oh, really? Yes, my love. That's all you have to do. It's just message 1 and message 2, and then that's it. They'll back off, I promise you. No, but they're going to message me in between. I said, try it. I said, I'm going to challenge you. Just try it and see what happens. Come the next week and they go, my mom didn't message me. I'm like, really? That's amazing. Wow, you know, moms can back off. Why? Because they're taking responsibility. And maybe that's also part of the journey, is going, if you want me to stop messaging you, then you need to message me. Let's shift the role slightly.
I want to ask regarding that. How helpful would it be to make the feeling of what the parents go through when they worry about their kids? How helpful would it be for the children to understand what this feeling is? Like, because when you're worried about a child, probably they can't understand what it means because they don't have children. So, and how helpful would it be if they can understand, if we can make them relate to a certain feeling that they worry about, so that they can understand in the moment that when my parents are worried about me, so I need to like clarify where I am.
Absolutely vital, because a feeling is a feeling, right? If you're worried, whether I'm worried about banging my toe or whether I'm worried about my child, it's the feeling of worry. And so what I often do is that through time, I find a certain sport or a certain love or a certain friend that I'll say, okay, so if your friend did this, if your friend all of a sudden stopped talking to you, like, what would that feeling be like? Now, I'd be so sad, I'd be so worried, you know, maybe they're cross with me, maybe they want to talk to me. I'm like, okay, that's the same feeling that mom goes through when you don't message her. Oh, okay, maybe I'll message her. So that relatability is vital, and it makes such a difference. Beautiful question.
And what a lovely way of answering it. Certainly, you know, I think perhaps, you know, like a lot of other people, I'm perhaps guilty of not doing that. But the idea of transferring the scenario, and it may not, because, you know, kids do not understand parents, and to a certain extent, parents do not understand kids. And of course, with the teenage brain doing what it does, like it's sort of you know, turning to mush and then regrouping, it can't focus much further than about that at the best of times. And when it comes to risk taking, that just goes out of the window. So it's not until they're in their mid-20s perhaps that they really start to understand those sort of feelings. But the idea of transferring the scenario to another situation, which may not even be with a friend, it may be with another fear or worry that the child might have. I love that idea. I was going to ask you for some hints and tips, and I think you've just given them to us. So thank you so much indeed. We got time for one more. Anybody before we wrap up tonight? Is Vanessa coming on? You're muted, Vanessa.
Oh, unmute
Vanessa,
yourself, Vanessa.
Vanessa, you're muted. Can you unmute?
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Thank
I did
you.
at the end. So yeah, I can relate. But I had a quick comment about, yeah, letting go when kids are going out, and also clarification of communication. And I've had to work quite hard at that, but it's working. There's more clarity of rather than just getting a message. Yeah, I'm not going to be back now. I'll actually get to communicate what's certain. Well, I suppose that is certain. Anyway, it's getting better, but it takes time. It takes time.
Oh, yes.
Communication is a skill. You know, just because we talk, it doesn't mean that we know how to communicate.
Okay.
And I actually had a client today that says, you know, like, she's like, please talk to my child about communicating, because her child ran out of glue, and, you know, and her child was like, I've run out of glue. And she was like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, you know, so what she's wanting her child to go is, Mom, I ran out of glue, but don't worry, I'm using from a friend. Do you mind getting me some later this week? So that is what she's wanting, but that's not what is coming out.
Mm.
And so this is part of communication, is we need to share where we at. We need to share our needs and our desires. And, you know, from an adult brain, it's adult emotions, but no logic. So we as parents are coming from a logic perspective, and they're coming from emotional perspective. This is where there's complete miscommunication. And so when we start to juggle, that's where the emotion comes in. Let's relate to this emotion, that emotion, this emotion, that emotion. All of a sudden, there's a connection, there's an understanding, because then they understand what you're talking about.
Dominique, thanks so much indeed. It's
Thank you.
7 o'clock UK, which is the end of the series. So thank you so much for all of that. I think the only thing I could perhaps add, and this is, you know, this is a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer it, is how were you guys when you were adolescents? And what I can,
Very painful.
it was a long time ago for me and I can't remember. That's my excuse.
Very painful. I was very painful and stubborn.
I was arrogant,
Rebellious.
embarrassingly arrogant when I look back on it.
For sure, looking at my son, who's soon to turn 21, and realizing what I've done to my parents, it's paying back to me big time.
Nigel, thanks so much for that. I think we'll all go away chastened and
Yes.
vowing to do better with our children. So thank you so much indeed. You know, I've learnt lots tonight, and I hope everybody else has. And I will stop with the recording if I can.
Thank you so much, everybody, and for your beautiful questions and for being here.